Hello, I'm Rick Ward, founder of Orbit's Edge, and I listen to the Cold Star Project.
This show is for entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be what is termed professional advice. The Cold Star Project is proudly presented by the Operational Excellence Society. Cold Star Tech is a supporter of the OPEX Society, and Jason Kanigan is a member of its board of advisors. Talk with us at Cold Star Tech to find out more about the OPEX Society and what we can achieve together in your organization, or just visit opexsociety.org. Thanks for joining us for today's show.
Today's guest is a young man in the space industry who is going places. He understands the need for engineering, but also the need for sales. He gets business development. And so if you're in the space industry, and this guy, then maybe you should think about hiring him. He has a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering from the Florida Institute of Technology, and then he took your favorite program of mine, the Commercial Space Studies Graduate Certificate Program taught by Andy Aldrin and Mr. Autry at International Space University. And I wanted him on to talk to me about his experience as a student being in that program and to share with you what it's like. He's also the producer and host of a new podcast called the Final Frontier Podcast, competing directly with me, right? Not bringing his own perspective, learning about the space industry. His name is Daniel Penaranda. Daniel, welcome. So Daniel, tell us a bit about your background and why you chose to attend ISU-FIT's commercial space program.
Well, first of all, Jason, thank you very much for having me today. I'm very honored to be a part of your podcast. I've seen your past guests and the caliber of people that you've had on the show, and I think it's a privilege to be on here today. But a little bit about my background. I graduated in aerospace engineering in 2019. This December would make it 2 years. And after that, I realized, especially during the judging of our senior design project, that I had a knack for business development. So I really wanted to pivot early on in my career versus waiting further on. And I worked in business development with a company, a startup called Tomahawk Robotics, and really learned fairly quickly in that environment because everyone's counting on each other, and startup environment is really fast paced. So had to learn on the fly and develop a great set of skills during my tenure there. And afterwards, I got recruited by a company called Harbor City Capital, and it was more of a hedge fund than anything. And it was my introduction to the capital markets. And part of my role in that company was to be the producer for the Deal Flow Show, which was to invite guests and leaders within the capital markets and host their expertise in that show. And I got to meet really incredible people during that podcast. Range from celebrities to people that are managing over $2 billion in assets for their companies. And after that, unfortunately, the company didn't survive COVID. And that's when I decided to realign myself with my initial passions, which is both business development and aerospace and the space industry. And really, when I was graduating, right across the hall from here where I'm sitting, Andy Aldrin gave a presentation of the Commercial Space Studies program. And this was a week before I graduated. And I initially thought that this is a program that I needed to attend one day. And the year and a half that I was away from the space industry was a program that I always thought of. So when I got the bad news, I thought, this is a great time to re-enroll myself and build up some additional credentials related to the industry. So I decided to join the Commercial Space Studies program, and what a great idea. It was such a fantastic program.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that you realized early on that sales, business development was a field that you wanted to go into. I fought it personally. I came out with operations management education, factory management and that, and my first boss wanted me to be a sales guy. And I just fought it for like 3 years, right? And I eventually had to grow into realizing he was a good talent scout. So awesome. And so Yeah, so you had Andy there actually giving a presentation and giving you the flavor of the thing. What were your thoughts and emotions going into that graduate certificate program? You know, it's at a higher level. There's lots of speakers. They do a great job of bringing in people, right, to give you the truth about what's going on in the industry. Did you have a clear mental picture of what was going to happen, or was it kind of fuzzy?
Well, yeah, I had a clear mental picture, and first of all, I thought just Andy's perspective in the industry. Obviously, his dad's Buzz Aldrin, and when he was about 8 years old, I believe, Andy, was witnessing his father, stepping on the moon. So I see that as probably one of the most valuable perspectives that anyone can bring into the industry. Growing up at the start as close as you could possibly get, and then having a long career within that industry and experiencing everything that was going on throughout the industry. That was really what compelled me to join it, and also the additional teachers. So you had Greg Altry, who during class he would say, "Hey, give me a minute." He had to go take an interview, and he's like, "Yeah, I just spoke to CNN," and he's showing us pictures of him with Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, and really, I mean, he's right in the neck of the middle of everything, related to space. And we also had Angie Buckley, who's chief engineer, who was teaching our space technology and systems class, chief engineer for Aerospace Corporation. So when you have, really people that are in the top of the game in the space industry, I think it was a great call to, to learn from them. And take mentorship from them and build up that career. So my mental picture was, this, not often do you see these kind of opportunities come up. And I really believe that was going to be worth all the time and effort to take this program.
Yeah. And previously you had figured out on your own that follow the money, right? Where does venture capital come from and that kind of thing, right? And learned about that. When you got into the program, there's a lot of people who I've seen go through that program. I've obviously talked with Andy about it on this show a number of times, who come in thinking that the technical side of things is what's really important. What was your impression and experience?
So, and I'll draw this back to my senior design project and when we were getting judged. So first of all, I think I was a great engineer. Our project won the showcase for that year for aerospace engineering, and I graduated with pretty good grades. But throughout that entire process, and even the presentations that we were giving during class, some of the questions were, if you were to take this product to market, what changes would you make to that product, and what problems can you solve in the industry with it? And that was really when the light bulb lit up for me. I was like, so obviously the technology matters, but identifying what problem it's going to solve in the industry is probably a little bit more important than just building up a really cool robot. And that was really what was articulated during the commercial space studies program. They said maybe 10, 15, 20% of your presentation to an investor is going to be centered around the technology. If that, the majority of the presentation is going to be how big is the market? Who are your customers? Do you have customer validation? Do people want this product? Who have you talked to? So really, yes, I believe business development holds a very important part in the entire space industry and that lifetime cycle of a company.
Mm-hmm. Let's dig into that phrase, business development, a little bit, because a lot of people equate it with sales. I know I did early on in my career, very early on, when I didn't know any better. What does business development mean to you? What does that encapsulate?
Taking on responsibilities and roles that are going to develop your business to the next step and a little bit further. That does encompass sales. That encompasses, taking deals from open to close. But I also believe that encompasses building relationships, building partnerships with companies that don't equate, directly to revenue, but also building a brand recognition around that. So you also encompass a little bit of marketing as well, because that all ties into the entire sales cycle. You know, if people don't know who you are, that pitch and that entry point is going to be a little bit more difficult than if they have at least heard of you before.
Right. Yeah. Helping them move up that level of buyer awareness. Yeah. To know you a little bit before they encounter you in person. Right. It's
Yep.
really, really important. So tell us about in the commercial space program, what resources and assignments, maybe just one or two, that you were provided. What did working and learning look like in the program?
Yeah. So there was a lot of reading. I would say maybe a dozen total books that you had to read in about a 3-month time span. But also, in terms of assignments, we were assigned, we had 4 different classes. One was centered around space law and finance. Other one was global space market. So that's analyzing the markets. Another one was space entrepreneurship, and also space technology and systems. So for our space technology and systems course, everything imaginable in terms of technology and space at a very high level view. So we're not jumping into the thermodynamics or the derivations of the equations, to jump into deep engineering design, but very high level at a managerial point of view, every aspect of space technology. So ranging from orbital mechanics to rocketry, to satellite and satellite subsystems. I think I could literally reference any of the slides that were given to me. Purchase an engineering specific book to become very well equipped to make some sort of preliminary design out of that. So the assignment was to solve
simulation.
Solve a problem in the industry that was made by one of our professors, and we were split into 4 different teams, and the idea was to develop it from the ground up. So what kind of payload would you have on your satellite? What satellite orbit would you park it at? And why is that more beneficial? What kind of power subsystem would you have? Would it be solar powered, battery powered, and so forth? So that was a really capstone to that course. For our global markets class, we analyzed launch vehicle markets, the satellite market, Earth observation market, and a few other ones. And for that course, our capstone project was to choose a market and a problem that we wanted to analyze and that draw interest to us. And I did mine on geospatial data analytics, so utilizing Earth observation imagery to service companies that needed geospatial data analytics. So we had to go and identify what's the size of that market, who are the potential customers, do SWOT analysis for that as well, and Porter's 5 forces analysis on it as well. For a space entrepreneurship class, so this was taught by Greg Autry, and it was to teach us really how to identify a good business case that could be taken to market and that could potentially survive the high startup failure rates. So he really focused around, you could have a great idea, of a product or a technology, but if it's not going to solve a problem, then it's not going to survive. So he really focused around, identify what are the problems that your customer needs. For our course, we literally had to make calls to potential clients and say, hey, is this something of interest? What are your problems? And identify those points. And our end project was to tie together an entire pitch, 10 to 15 minutes that we present at the end of the course. And we had to give, literally a sales pitch, a presentation, an investor pitch at the end of the course in front of him and a few other people that were brought in as guests to judge our presentations. And finally, for our space law and finance class, we identified national space innovation systems for multiple countries. So, of course, the U.S., we looked at ESA, China, Russia, Japan, to name a few, and very similar to how we analyze those countries and how big is their GDP relative, and how big is their space budgets relative to their GDP. What percentage of the GDP do they spend in space and in defense? We had to do a very similar analysis for a country of our choice, and I did mine on Argentina and give a presentation. It was about 15, 20 minutes long. Some people went even longer. And that's just to name a few of those assignments that we had to do. It was very intensive, very much graduate level education, and very fortunate that I was able to partake in a program like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Daniel, I'm really glad to hear that you had to go out and get facts from the real world and talk to people. It sounds like communication skills were heavily stressed, which are lacking out there in the world in this day and age. So anybody who comes through this program, I think will have some great experience. What would add up to a good grade in a class or for an assignment? Was there a learning curve to this where the first couple times you stumble a little bit and then you get better and better, or did they prep you and say, look, you have to have this checklist of things?
So they would prep us, say we needed this checklist of things, and kind of direct us on how we should go about it. Because some people in the course had never made a cold call, for instance.
Right.
And Greg was like, this is probably the best way to approach someone to do that. And I've had experience with that in the past. And really, I felt like this class married both of my experiences, my academic as well as professional experience. So I had a fairly, it was difficult. It required a lot of time, but fairly straightforward process to getting a good grade. Andy's a great grader, very fair. The engineering class was difficult, and that's coming from someone with a bachelor's degree in aerospace engineering, because I believe even that class covered areas that weren't covered in my degree, if that makes any sense. But when we were going to take our final exam, we asked, what are the slides that we should study for? And they said everything.
Yeah.
We had to memorize like about 1,000 slides worth of materials. That was, pretty intensive. I think straightforward, if you do your work, if you participate, because participation is also a big part of the grade, and it's not just showing up, but contributing to the conversation. That's also a big part of your grade. So as long as you do all those, I think you'll pass fairly easily.
Great. So I get the impression that you're not the kind of guy to sit in the back of the class and be quiet and that. You probably got up out of your chair and met people. What was the networking opportunity like of being in the program? What kind of connections have you made?
Yeah, so it's really funny that you mentioned that, Jason, because I like to take a leadership approach. And my initial thought of the course was that it was going to be people around my age attending. So I'm fairly young, other graduate level people. So as soon as we got on the group me, I started sending messages to people. I was like, hey, let's all meet up and try to make the best out of this course and get to know one of each other before we actually get to the course, and see how we could collaborate with notes, sharing, and all this stuff. So when we jump on this Zoom meeting, I realized that I'm probably the youngest out of the whole cohort. Andy actually said, I'm second youngest. There's someone else that's a little bit younger than me. But just in the cohort, in terms of networking, you had people who are the director of robotics and automation and sustainability for Axiom Space. You had someone who is, I think, product support and logistics for Space Force. You had someone who's spent 20 to 30 years in the capital markets industry, primarily in the mining industry, and he's raised over $1 billion in capital. You had someone who's in the medical device industry who's looking to pivot into the space industry that's put dozens of new products into market. space educators that are so passionate about what they do that when they speak about it, it brings them to tears. We had such an amazing cohort just with the people and students there alone. We also had a nuclear physicist and materials engineer. But the people that they brought to the program, it was a whole different level in itself as well. Some people that got me was astronaut Michael Fennick, Karina Dries, who was a past CEO and manager of the Mojave Spaceport. You had Chris Stott, who's CEO and executive chairman of Mansat. Peter Eckhart, who's the author of Simplicity for Success, a renowned rocket scientist. Richard DeBello, who was a vice president of business development for Virgin Galactic. You also had Tabor McCollum, who is CEO and founder of Space Perspective, which is another space tourism company. And they got a pretty incredible business model, in my opinion. And you also had Douglas Lavero, who was associate administrator for human spaceflight and operations for NASA. So that's just to name a few, and I'm sure I missed quite a number of them. But in terms of networking, it'd be difficult for myself just to reach out to someone like that, and having the opportunity to meet those kind of people during this program, I think was an incredible value add.
Right. Huh.
Aside from that, we got a tour of a few facilities. One was OneWeb satellites, and we got to see the entire manufacturing facility. Another one, we got to visit the Patrick Space Force. Got to see a number of rockets and get the honorary photo in front of a rocket. And we also got to visit Redwire and the Maiden Space facility, so that was quite incredible.
Yeah, and folks listening will recognize some of those names, Chris Stott and Doug Lavero, and that as being guests on this show as well. But that's very cool. Never underestimate, folks, the power of somebody being able to watch you work and see how you work, because they're going to remember. If they're a manager, if they're a CEO, if they're somebody like me, I'm always looking for talent, and the ability to watch somebody and go, how do they behave? Right? What does their research process look like? How intense are they? Do they stick with it? What kind of results do they get? How do they work with others? We keep a little mental file about this stuff, right? and it comes in pretty handy later. For outcomes, for beginning to end of the course, right? From start to finish, if you were to compare, what were the most surprising things, or what did you find you had to change your mind about?
So, really, one of the biggest realizations that came during the program was that the current capital markets infrastructure that exists today didn't exist 10 years ago for the space industry. You didn't really have angel investors or venture capitalists or private equity involvement in the space industry. I actually saw that a recent Bryce Technologies report said that the investments in space in 2020 were $7.6 billion. And if you look back at 2010, that was at about $3 billion. The following year after that, in 2011, was, I think, about 700 million. And in 2010 and 2011, primarily most of that was debt financing. For 2020, almost the majority of that was from venture capitalists and venture capitalism. So you see that there's really a big change that's occurring today, and there's definitely something really special going on in the space industry now. So that was something. I mean, in 2010, I was 14 or 15, so I was drooling at that point. So I didn't get to experience that. So that was really an incredible realization that I had during that program. Another realization was that despite what we learn in school and aerospace and what you see in the media today, you think that the space industry is really made up of launch vehicles and rockets. we're really only a small fraction of that. It is, the launch vehicles and the rockets. So out of the $400 billion in revenue that makes up the global space economy, about 20 billion of that, including government, is launch vehicles. The rest of that is the satellite industry and government budgets. So that's another shake-up call for someone who wasn't that aware of what the markets were like. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest realizations I got out of the program.
Nice. Well, Daniel, I'm glad you're here in the industry and learning as much as you can and understanding where the money comes from. And the last thing you said is a constant source of irritation for me when I deal with regular people, right, from outside the industry, thinking that launch is all there is, and tear out whatever hair I have left, trying to communicate. No, there's so much more, know. So if you're talking to a space or defense individual who has not taken the program, maybe hasn't even heard of it, what's the number one idea? If you had like 10 seconds to just whisper in their ear or shout at them, maybe this particular idea, what might that be?
So I think the number one idea that people in the defense industry really need to think about is their role in innovation. We are in a paradigm shift where it's leaning towards a lot of commercial involvement versus government involvement. But what I've realized, at least, and in my opinion, is that government plays an incredible role in innovation and establishing markets. We see it in the commercial orbital transportation program. We see it in the commercial resupply program. We see it in the commercial crew program. Without those kind of government programs driving, being a customer to commercial companies, I don't think companies like SpaceX, ULA, or Boeing might have disbanded because they weren't making revenue. And we see that the success of those kind of programs have driven the proliferation of LEO, MEO, and GEO. And we see a similar role that government is playing today with lunar development. So you see it in the CLIPS program. You also see it in the Human Lander System program. They're investing money to develop this technology and these capabilities to develop on the lunar surface. And we see commercial companies following suit to then support that kind of infrastructure with Artemis, for instance, as well. So I would really say that you guys should take pride in your roles, and you guys are really driving innovation, and it's a critical part of the development and the future of the industry.
Nice. Okay. Well, we'll get that message across in our small way. You have started your own space podcast, and congratulations on doing that. I know you and I both know what commitment level it requires and the intensity and the stick-to-itiveness and that. Tell us a bit about it. Tell us what it's called. And I think the first few episodes are out now, right? I'm going to link to it below in the description as well.
I appreciate that. And the podcast is called the Final Frontier Podcast. It aired October 4th, the start of International Space Week and the 64th anniversary of Sputnik. So I thought it was a great time to drop it, although the Instagram servers were down that day, so not beneficial on my part. But the show is really to network and connect with professionals in the industry. It's not just for my networking and my connecting. I love to be a connector in any way that I can be. So if I see that there's synergies between two companies, I always make that introduction. I have already made a few introductions that have been pretty beneficial, and to me, that's very fulfilling. But for someone who just graduated and is just joining the industry, a lot of advice you get is you should network with people. Networking is going to get you somewhere. And when I was in the Deal Flow show, that was articulated many times with the guests that were on the show as well. So versus rather than hearing the advice and not doing anything about it, I decided to act upon it and do it in a way that I thought would deliver value, not just to myself, but to the people listening, and that they could hear, who are the people that I'm connecting with as well. So I decided to, start the Final Frontier podcast for that reason. And really, it's been an incredible ride. A lot of things that I've had to learn how to do, developing a website, for instance, learning how to get the videography right, realizing not to wear yellow in front of a green screen because then it's going to mess everything up, those kind of things, and how to edit videos. So really, it's been a lot of legwork on my part, just on the interviews alone. I'm sure you're very well. Obviously, that takes up time, but there's a lot that goes on in the back end that takes up additional time, including the marketing materials. So when I love your podcast, because I know the idea is to bring that information out to the audience. So really resonate with those objectives.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. And being a super connector is a lot of fun. There's no real way you could lose, doing it as well. So I think it's great, and keep at it. By the way, folks, Daniel's website is better than mine. It's a hell of a lot better. I looked at it and I went, oh man, I got to put some more money into our thing here. So Final Frontier podcast, we'll link to it below. I've tried to like and share in the past couple of days that this has been out, and look forward to seeing more episodes. Daniel, if people want to get in touch with you, how should they go about it?
I always answer my call. Those bots that are auto warranty insurance people love me. My phone number is 954-446-5945. You could call me directly, or you could reach me through email at daniel@thefinalfrontierpodcast.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active these days, so those are ways that you can reach me.
All right, fantastic. Thanks for doing this, Daniel.
Absolutely, thank you.
It's always great to get a different perspective, a new perspective from folks entering the space industry and finding out what their experience has been, isn't it? Check out Daniel's podcast, the Final Frontier podcast, and if you have a chance, leave a review or like or something for the Cold Star Project if you enjoyed these episodes and want to hear more. Thanks for listening.